I'd never seen a German Shepherd puppy try to purr before. By the time they carried him out to my porch that afternoon in Columbus, Ohio, I could already tell he wasn't like the others. He came from a quiet little house on the edge of town. That's what the shelter girl told me, standing there with the leash wrapped twice around her hand. Empty yard, empty bowls, no people, no other dogs. Just this small German Shepherd puppy pressed flat against the front steps like he was trying to disappear into the wood. She said he hadn't barked once, not when they opened the gate, not when they put the slip lead over his head, not even when they lifted him into the truck and drove away from whatever was left of his family. He slid off the porch and onto my kitchen floor like a shadow. Didn't look at me, didn't sniff around the way most scared puppies do. He just kept his head low, eyes watching the ground to square as if eye contact might cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. I was about to say something soft and clumsy, the way old men do, when it happened. From the back room, one of my cats let out a sharp, offended meow. He froze mid-step. Every muscle in that little body locked. His ears twitched, tail tucked, but he was listening in a way he hadn't listened to me or the shelter staff all day. Another meow. Lower, older. That rusty sound only a 19-year-old cat can make. Mabel. The other cats came first, of course. They always do. A streak of gray, a pair of ginger brothers, tails puffed, backs arched, hissing at the intruder in their kitchen. He shrank down even smaller, shoulders folding, but he didn't back away. His nose worked the air, searching past the hiss and the fear for that one tired voice in the doorway. Then she appeared. Mabel shuffled in on stiff legs, thin as a coat hanger under her faded calico fur. She stared at him like she'd seen 100 scared creatures cross this floor before, and didn't plan to be impressed by one more. He stared back, finally lifting his eyes, not to me, not to the open door, but straight to that old cat. Nobody moved for a long, slow breath. Just the tick of the clock over the stove and the sound of his claws clicking once on the tile as he shifted his weight closer to her. Mabel took one step forward, sniffed his nose, then turned her back on all of us and curled up on the mat by the fridge. He followed and lay down exactly one paw length away, like he was afraid to touch what he'd just found. That night, the house got so quiet I could hear my own heart. I woke up in the dark to a sound I didn't recognize at first, something caught between a whimper and a motor starting. When I leaned in the doorway with the hall light off, I saw him on the kitchen mat, nose buried in Mabel's side, chest shaking with that strange little noise. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a cry. It was that homeless puppy, pressed against an old calico cat, trying his best to remember how to feel safe. You can tell this homeless puppy was raised by cats from the way he walked into my kitchen. Next morning in Columbus, Ohio, he fell in line behind my cats. The German Shepherd puppy padded after the gray Tom, placing each paw where the cats had been. When they settled on the rug by the window, he stopped on the edge and folded himself down the same way, back feet tucked tight, front paws pressed together. One calico jumped up on the sill. He tried to copy her, scrambled, slid back to the floor with a soft thump, then glanced up at them, unsure and hopeful. At breakfast, I set his bowl on the floor. He sniffed once, then backed away. That puppy just stood there. So I put Mabel's dish down first. She took her time, and when she started to eat, he finally eased in beside her, chewing when she chewed, pausing when she paused. Later, I stripped the couch to wash the blanket they'd turned into a shared bed. The second I lifted it, he spun on the bare cushions, whining, searching for the missing smell he trusted. I spread a clean throw in its place. He wouldn't touch it until Mabel climbed up, turned one slow circle, and dropped herself in the center. Only then did he crawl along her side and let himself breathe. Watching them, I remembered the first cat my wife carried through this doorway. I'd said we didn't need more responsibility. She just smiled and told me, "Cats choose who to love. We're here to open the cans." That evening, when the rooms settled into their quiet, I went looking for him. I found the puppy crammed into a cat basket, paws spilling over the edge, 4 cats curled around him, and for the first time since he arrived, he didn't look lost at all. He didn't bark for days. He just watched us like he was afraid to be heard. He moved through the house like a guest who might be asked to leave. Soft steps, a sigh now and then, a tiny whine when a door shut too hard, but not one full bark. He watched the cats like they held some answer he needed, sat under the table while they took the chairs, waited in the doorway when they padded down the hall. When Mabel curled up, he folded himself near her paws, copying her without thinking. One afternoon, I dozed off in my chair by the window. I woke because there was weight on my chest that hadn't been there before. He'd climbed onto me, all legs and awkward bones, and stretched himself along my shirt. Then he started to knead, slow and steady, the way a kitten works at a blanket. Paws pressing into my ribs, head tucked under my chin like he was trying to hide inside my breath. Something in me gave way. Maybe it was that frantic little heartbeat against mine. Maybe it was all the quiet he'd been carrying. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Easy there, Percy. I'm not going anywhere." He went still at the sound of it. Then the German Shepherd puppy let out a long breath and settled his full weight onto me, like the name had finally given him permission to belong. Years ago, in this same room, I said I was done naming animals. No more strays, no more grief when they left. My wife only smiled and said the hurt was the price of loving them right. Now here I was, an old man who thought he was finished, handing a name to a homeless pup without even thinking twice. That night, I found him asleep, pressed tight against Mabel on the kitchen mat, nose buried in her fur. Sometime past midnight, he let out the smallest, startled bark in his sleep, and I realized the dog inside him was finally waking up, even if his heart still moved to the quiet rhythm of the cats. The first time he heard another dog bark, Percy tried to hide behind a 10-pound cat. We were halfway down the block, just a quiet afternoon in Columbus, when a hound across the street let loose one sharp, deep bark. Percy, that little German Shepherd puppy, dropped flat to the sidewalk like someone had cut his strings. Then he scrambled up and shoved himself behind my legs, shaking so hard I could feel it through the leash. The other dog was just talking to the world the way dogs do. Tail loose, nose in the air, nothing mean in him at all. But Percy stared like the sound itself might come across the street and tear him in half. I turned us around, slow and easy, and we walked home with him glued to my calf the whole way. The second we opened the front door, he bolted for the kitchen. The cats were stretched out on the table like they owned the mortgage. Percy slid under the chair where Mabel sat, pressing his side against hers until his breathing started to match her slow, patient rhythm. At the shelter later, I said, "It's the strangest thing. He's terrified of dogs, but he curls up in a room full of cats like he's one of them." There was a pause on the line. "Maybe that's all he's known," they said. It reminded me of a boy from my childhood after an accident who wouldn't step off the porch for months. We didn't drag him out. We just sat with him there, day after day, until the world felt less dangerous from that one small place. A few evenings after that walk, the shelter called again. They said a family with a big backyard and a friendly dog was interested in Percy, and I felt a cold little draft move straight through my warm old house. They came looking for a brave pup. What they found was a German Shepherd puppy who thought he was a cat. They arrived on a Saturday, husband and wife and a teenage boy, all smiles and clean sneakers, standing on my porch with hopeful eyes. The shelter had told them Percy was sweet and quiet, good with other animals, the kind of dog who might grow into a steady companion. Inside, the house already knew something was off. The cats had vanished to high shelves and curtain rods. Percy had squeezed himself into the narrow gap behind the old cabinet in the living room, just his nose and one paw sticking out. I tried treats, gentle words, that upbeat voice people use when they want a dog to show well. He stayed wedged in place, trembling. You could hear his breath, but you couldn't see his courage anywhere. Then from the hallway came the soft scrape of old claws on wood. Mabel shuffled in like she was late to her own party. The family spotted her and laughed quietly. "There are cats too?" Percy heard her before he saw her. His ears twitched, and that little paw crept forward. When Mabel passed the cabinet without even looking his way, he finally slid out and followed, keeping his body lined up with hers like a shadow. I knelt and introduced him, but he didn't rush to sniff their hands or jump up. He walked past them, nose close to Mabel's tail, then circled once and lay down right beside her feet. From there, he watched the family from under his brow, eyes dark and uncertain, like the room was bigger than he knew how to handle. "We thought he'd be more active," the wife said after a while, her voice kind but puzzled. I felt my face heat, like I'd failed some test on his behalf. It's a strange thing, sitting there while strangers silently decide if a scared little dog is convenient enough to love. They stood, thanked me, scratched the air near Percy without touching him. He's wonderful, the husband said, but maybe he's not the right fit for us. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Relief washed through me first, then something heavier settled in right behind it, because for a moment there, that quiet puppy had almost had a home. Mabel was 19, all bones and attitude, and she had just adopted a German Shepherd puppy. You could see the years in the way she moved down the hallway, every step careful, tail flicking like she was counting her balance. And right behind her, every time, came Percy. If she lay by the heater, he wrapped himself around her like a shaggy comma. If she shifted to the sunny spot on the rug, he picked himself up and followed, dragging one of his toys along, dropping it by her paws even though she never once batted it. He watched her the way some people watch the weather, checking for every small change. If she shivered, he scooted closer. If she coughed that old rusty cough, he lifted his head, waiting, not breathing until she settled again. On bath day, I carried Mabel to the sink, more towel than cat in my hands. The water was warm, just enough to loosen the dust from her fur, not enough to startle old bones. Percy paced tight circles at my feet, nails ticking on the tile, eyes wide and wild like I'd put his whole world in that basin. When I wrapped her in a faded blue towel and held her against my chest, he reached up, stretching as far as he could, trying to nose his way in, checking that she was still there. The shelter liked to remind me over the phone, gentle but firm. Don't forget, he'll need his own home eventually. The cats are a separate story. I'd nod, staring at that big dog-shaped shadow curled around a cat-sized life, and think how some stories don't feel very separate when you're the one watching them. I remembered my wife in a hospital bed years back, and the old cat we had then parked on her blanket, refusing to budge no matter who tried to move her. Back then, the animal kept watch over the weak human. Now the roles had flipped, and this young, confused pup was standing guard over the frail old queen of my house. One night, long after the news had gone quiet and the dishes were done, I looked over from my chair and saw Mabel climb down, slow and shaky, leaving the cushion that had been hers for a decade. She crossed the room, stepped onto Percy's pad, and folded herself right between his front paws. He tightened around her without waking. I watched them breathe together for a long while and whispered into the dim kitchen light, "You picked him, didn't you?" I didn't want to ask the question because I already knew the answer. It slipped out anyway, in the middle of a routine call with the shelter. We'd gone over food, meds, how the German Shepherd puppy was settling in with the cats. Then my voice got smaller. "What's the longest you've seen a cat like Mabel go?" There was a pause you can feel through a phone. They asked about her eating, her weight, whether she still climbed, whether she still groomed herself or just lay there while Percy did all the worrying for her. I told the truth. Not much food, not much climbing, a lot of sleeping with one tired eye halfway open. "She's had a good long run," they said, soft. "Just keep her comfortable. It probably won't be very long." Silence settled between us. I stared at Percy, wrapped around her on the rug like a living blanket, his nose tucked under her chin. Then came the part I'd been avoiding even more. "And when that time comes," they went on, "we should talk about Percy. He'll need a home where they can help him be a dog, not just a cat with longer legs." I knew they were right. That scared, gentle pup deserved people who could take him farther than my little house and its choir of old cats. But the idea of choosing a life for him without asking him first sat wrong in my chest. I'd already outlived too many decisions. All day the air felt heavier, like the walls knew what we'd been talking about. Mabel slept hard, hardly moving. Percy barely left her side, except to follow me from room to room like he was checking my edges too. That night, when I finally sat down, he surprised me. Instead of curling up against Mabel, he walked over, folded himself at my feet, and laid his head across my knees like they were the safest place he knew. For the first time, it crossed my mind, clear as a bell in that quiet room. Maybe I wasn't the only one keeping an eye on everyone. Maybe he was watching me too. That night, the house was too quiet, even with 4 cats and 1 confused puppy in it. Mabel had been fading for days, like someone slowly turning down a dimmer switch. She picked at her food, then left it altogether. Her walks shrank from room to couch, from couch to the pad by the heater, until even that looked too far. Her eyes still followed us, but the rest of her seemed tired of negotiating with gravity. Percy stayed pressed to her side, that young German Shepherd puppy hardly moving except to adjust around her bones. His breath came shallow, like he was afraid that if he inhaled too deeply, he might blow her right out of this world. Every time she shifted, he lifted his head, checked her face, then laid it back down again. I pulled a chair between them and just sat, one hand resting on her back, the other on his shoulder. The TV was off, the clock ticking too loud, the kind of silence that remembers every other goodbye you've ever had. Faces came and went in my mind. My wife in that hospital room, old pets whose collars I still keep in a drawer. You'd think practice would make leaving easier. It doesn't. Sometime near dawn, her breathing turned soft and thin, like a thread running out. She let out one long sigh, the kind that sounds almost like relief, and then there was nothing more to count. No struggle, no drama, just less of her in the room. Percy didn't move at first. He lay there a long time, nose buried in the fur that was already cooling, eyes open and fixed on some point I couldn't see. Finally, he stood, slow and stiff, and stepped off the pad. He looked down at the empty spot where she had been, then around the room like he was checking whether anyone was going to fix this. He didn't howl. He didn't whine. He bent his head, picked up her old stuffed mouse in his teeth, walked over to me and laid it in my lap like he was asking, as politely as he knew how, what we were supposed to do now. He searched every corner of the house for a cat who wasn't coming back. That next day, the German Shepherd puppy moved like a ghost through the rooms. He checked under my chair where she used to nap. He checked the kitchen doorway where she'd wait for me to drop crumbs. He pushed his nose into the laundry basket she'd once claimed for herself and stood there, breathing in dust and memory. Then he went to the little room off the hall, the one where her bed sat against the wall. He walked in a slow circle, sniffed the blanket, the empty water bowl, the spot where her fur still clung to the fabric. Finally, he folded himself down right in the center of it, curling his long legs into the shape she used to make with her small, tired body. I kept her old collar and that battered toy mouse on the pad because I couldn't bring myself to move them. He reached out with one paw, pulled the toy close, and pressed his chest over it like he was trying to keep it warm. When I set his food down, he just looked at it, then turned his head away. For a while there, he stopped being a hungry pup and started being something else entirely. He lay in her basket more than his own, barely lifting his head when the other cats drifted by. They gave him space, tails low, as if they understood this was sacred ground. Sometimes one of them would slip in beside him for a moment, touch his side with a whiskered cheek, then leave him alone again. I worried I was going to lose him the same way I'd lost her. So I sat on the floor and fed him a few bites from my hand, telling him stories he didn't need the words for, only the sound. I opened the back door and let the sun spill onto the rug, coaxing him to stretch out where the warmth could reach his bones. I let him keep her things, kept my hand on his back, tried to show him that just because one heartbeat faded, the whole world hadn't walked out. A few days into this quiet, when I finally dared to think he might be coming back to himself, the shelter called again. They said there was a family ready for a rescued puppy just like him. A good yard, steady people, a fresh start. They didn't know about Mabel or how he still slept in her empty bed. To them, he was simply ready for a new life. I clipped the leash on and Percy sat down like a stone. It was one of those pale Ohio mornings when the sky looks like it hasn't made up its mind. The new family pulled up to the curb, smiles a little nervous, car cleaned out, blanket spread in the back like they were welcoming a guest. Inside, the German Shepherd puppy watched from the doorway, ears back, body low, but when I called his name, he came. He followed me down the steps, close to my knee, leash loose, head hanging. We made it halfway to the car before he stopped. No warning. He just folded his back end down onto the driveway and locked every muscle like concrete. I gave the leash a gentle tug. Nothing. His eyes weren't on the people or their outstretched hands. He was staring over his shoulder at the front door, breathing fast, as if the house itself might walk away if he looked away too long. I tried again, softer. "Come on, buddy, it's okay." Instead of moving toward the car, he leaned backward, dragging me a step toward the porch. Then he pulled harder, nose lifting to the door, to the little room inside where Mabel's bed still sat with her blanket and that old toy mouse. The father frowned, confused. The son shifted from foot to foot. "What's wrong with him?" they asked, not unkindly, just baffled. I looked at Percy, at the place where his family had been made out of cats and quiet rituals, and felt something settle heavy in my chest. "He thinks his family is still in there," I said. "He doesn't understand that we're asking him to leave them behind." For a minute, nobody spoke. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I handed the leash to the boy, turned, and walked back into the house. I went to Mabel's corner and picked up her old basket, blanket and all. The fabric still held her shape, her fur, her story. I carried it out like it was made of glass and set it gently in the back of their car. Percy watched every step. His ears twitched, head tilted, eyes tracking that basket like it was a living thing. When I nodded and tapped the bumper, he hesitated, then stood, one paw at a time, and climbed in beside it, curling his body around the empty space she used to fill. The mother looked at me over the open door. "Is there another cat he's close to?" she asked. I swallowed, feeling all the years I'd lived in that one question. "He doesn't come without a cat," I said. Not really. I never thought I'd see the day when someone asked, "Can we take the cat too?" After that day in the driveway, the first family stepped back. I couldn't blame them, but it left us with a question nobody quite knew how to answer. At the shelter office, they still call me Sir most days, but on the forms, my name is Walter. We all sat around that scratched table, papers spread out, talking in circles about a German Shepherd puppy who wouldn't leave without a cat. Normally, we don't place mixed pairs, they said. Dogs here, cats there, simple lines on a chart. Then she walked in, a woman about my daughter's age, with tired eyes and car keys hooked on one finger. She listened to Percy's story, to Mabel's, to the way he still curled around an empty basket. "My dad's alone now," she said quietly. "He's always had both, dogs and cats. He says the house echoes without Paws." They brought Percy into the meeting room first, tail low, shoulders tight. He stayed by my knee, watching the strangers, that rescued puppy, trying to be brave in a room that smelled like bleach and hope. Then the tech opened another carrier and set down the calm gray Tom who'd started sleeping closest to him after Mabel was gone. The change in Percy was like someone loosened a knot. He stepped forward, brushed his side against the cats, and then, for the first time in front of new people, walked up to them without shaking. He kept himself between the man's hand and the cat's shoulder, but he went. He let that old hand rest on his head, eyes half closed, as if to say, "This one's with me." Standing there, I realized I wasn't handing over a dog and a cat. I was letting go of a small, patched-together family that had built itself right under my roof. That evening, back in my suddenly quiet house, my phone buzzed. It was a video from the shelter. Percy was stretched out on a stranger's living room rug, the new old man scratching his ears, and that gray cat was asleep on Percy's back, like he'd finally found the right hill to rest on. I watched it twice, maybe 3 times, smiling through tears I didn't bother to wipe away. I used to think rescue was just finding a dog a place to sleep. Percy, that little German Shepherd puppy who tried to purr, taught me it's about keeping the pieces of a heart together. Some nights, when the house in Columbus is too quiet, I still see him in my mind. A scared rescued puppy wrapped around an old calico cat, a young dog who wouldn't get in the car until her empty basket was loaded first, a video on my phone of an old man I've never met stroking Percy's ears while a gray cat naps on his back like a living memory. If you've lived long enough, you probably have your own box of old collars or a faded photo on the fridge. You know what it is to love something small and loyal and then have to let it go. That ache doesn't mean you were weak. It means you did it right. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. They're the ones who show up when a dog is found alone in an empty yard. They're the ones who say, "We'll take the cat too," when everyone else wants an easy story. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's opening your door even when you know it will hurt later. It's sitting on the floor so a shaking animal has a heartbeat to lean on. It's letting them keep their strange little families and helping them believe that losing one friend doesn't mean losing the whole world. If Percy's story reminded you of a dog you once had, or of the way your own house felt after that last goodbye, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Share this. Show it to your kids, your grandkids. Every time his story is told, another scared animal gets one more chance at the kind of gentle ending he found. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.